pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll establish a quorum, please. We have a quorum. Approval of agenda, change of sequence, removal of items.
I move to approve the agenda as posted.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Announcements, the student representative update.
So far, our student body has been busy with door decorating. Here's one of the finished doors on there. It's really a unique time because it has all of the different grades work with students that you wouldn't normally have classes with. So you have to get creative, go on Pinterest, find an idea, and then use what you have to execute it.
All right, and coming up on December 26th, Student Council is going to be helping with the Winter Wonderland lights. We'll be working there. Usually it's an NHS-led activity, but this year Student Council is going to be taking it over mostly because pretty much everyone in NHS is also in Student Council, so it just works better for us that way and we can get more involvement then. Yeah.
And then we'll also be planning a blood drive on February 8th. This is something new for the student council group, so it'll be a great opportunity for us to try something new. And then with senior trip planning, I've been in contact with Dan Hahn about busing, so we're making some progress and everybody's really excited.
We have dress-up days, and usually we don't do this for Christmas, but we're going to this year. We think it will improve the school spirit and just the overall atmosphere of our student body. We haven't quite decided on what those are going to be or how we're going to decide that, but we just thought it would be a good idea.
We've heard requests about a pajama day, like the Polar Express pajama day was always a favorite. And then with graduation planning, we're hoping to schedule a meeting in the next few weeks to get started on planning. Is there any questions?
I have a question about the blood drive. Is that going to be open to the community?
Yes. The details aren't completely figured out yet, but all we have right now is pretty much the date, and some of the other student council members are in contact.
Do you see any problems with the interaction with on transportation? Do you foresee any issues there?
I think it's going to work really well, being able to use HON rather than a private company.
Thank you.
It's all good.
Right, moving to celebrations, we have the academic spotlight at the elementary school.
We have our first grade team here. We have Mrs. Moore, Mrs. Jackson, and Mrs. Stone, and they are going to talk about their time during early release.
First grade, the power of the PLC, increasing student learning.
So first we wanted to touch base on all of our data. Excuse my voice, I'll try my best. But this is my class's data. According to the PALS test that we give, which is their letter sounds, their sight words, and their
Spelling skills.
spelling, thank you. Thank you, Jody.
You're welcome.
8 of my 15 students were identified, which means that they did not reach the benchmark score. And then 3 of them are receiving the urgent intervention through us at school.
So the next slide is my class. My class also has about half or 8 of my 15 students identified as needing urgent intervention. And in this case, because we only have one reading interventionist, there's only one student that's actually receiving an urgent intervention.
With my class, I only have 4 of them, and none of them are getting the intervention, but through when they're getting assistance as well.
So if we talk about, well, why might these scores be so alarming? We came up with a list of possible reasons. Last year, the kindergarten classes had very large class sizes. They were given an 8, but that's not the same as having smaller class sizes. That could be one possible reason. There's also increasing student behaviors in the elementary school, and oftentimes those increasing behaviors distract from being able to focus on the academic content, which again, we can't pinpoint, but it could be possible. We did have a change in our phonics program maybe 2 years ago, and with any program, even the ones we love, there's sometimes a little bit of learning curve to figure out what the program is really strong in and what the program might need some supplemental resources in, so that could be another possible cause. And then the last one, of course, is COVID. This particular year, children were in 4K when we had no learning for the whole fourth quarter, so that might have had something to do with it. And then the following year, all of the teachers were required to wear masks, which might not seem like a big deal to you, but when you're trying to learn the difference between F and if, it might make a difference to a small 6-year-old student. So those are just some of the reasons, but truthfully, we're not focusing on the reasons. We're focusing on what can we do to help these students to get them where they need to be by the end of the year. That's our goal.
So with this, we just wanted to show you the historical data and why it's so alarming this year. If you see the trends, students identified to now, where we have the bigger numbers, so.
So this is the standard. When we look through all of the English language arts standards, this is the one that pops out the most for us. And what the students are struggling in is their letter identification. And clearly you can see here that that is a prerequisite skill to being able to spell, say, a CBC word, or even an E, knowing how to use the silent E in a word. So the screener worked. These students don't know their letter sounds. They will not be able to do these skills unless we do something for them. And that's really the power of our vertical PLCs coming to play here.
So during our vertical team, we were able to get together and go through like, what does 4K teach, what does kindergarten teach, what does first, second, and third, and then we see how it all aligns. And then most of them are the same, but we're just building up along the way for between 4K through second.
So through that powerful act of all of us getting together in our PLC, we thought of some action steps that we could take to help meet all of these needs in our grade level. So we thought about bringing back Jolly Phonics, which we would start in 4K. This was done in kindergarten previously with letter sounds and songs and actions that really help the children remember those letters and sounds. So I just have a quick video here. If the volume and so young, and so young, and so young, they're causing me alarm. So just that, now you're gonna remember the letter A makes the A because of the ants. And we thought that's really helpful to kids, and we stopped doing that. So we really want to bring that back because that is such a needed skill. And going back to that letter and knowledge and sound knowledge to strengthen that and more short vowel practice. So,
We did like
it.
So in our classrooms, even with the kindergarten through second grade, they all have universal posters. They're the same throughout each grade level. Some of them get higher up with the sounds and everything. And for us, we have the alphabet again from previous year, but it's our new mascot. And then we do have the blends. And then probably second grade, we'll have the other ones. Each student also has their own one, whether it's in their reading box, their writing folder, and some of them even take them home to practice at home. We do games with them and different activities with them throughout the year.
So these next few slides are going to show you how we're trying to change our universal instruction so that the children who need more work with these particular charts are getting them. This slide shows our universal instruction. Right now we're working on The Mystery of the Silent E, which is that big poster up in the corner. And this just shows you two of the many, many examples we do. The first one is a video of two students who are trying to use the short vowel and then that magic E at the end. And the second one is a few days later when we're trying to spell these words and knowing which one needs the short vowel and which one then needs the silent E that you can't hear at the end.
Shine of the sun.
Happens to be Mrs. Stone's son also.
Oh, that's a chin. Chin. What's a shin? Have you ever played soccer? Oh, shin. Yes, that front part of your leg that needs a pad when you play soccer. Good. Shin. So what does the word say right now? Shin. And then, with that E on there? Awesome.
So we were doing that same activity, just simply writing on whiteboards a few days later. Oh, and I did the same thing you did. Thank you. And so this is those clips I was referencing before where we're using those alphabet charts and really drilling in on those skills. One of the first things we did was the video here of the little girl. She's got the mat, and she's also got that exact same mat cut into small pieces, and she's trying to say the letter, say the sound it makes, and then the picture, and then match it right on the mat. We're trying to make a mental picture everywhere they go so they always can remember that ball. It says, and it makes the letter B. And after they've practiced that skill for a while, maybe a week or two, they're getting really quick at it. Then we start doing what this little boy is doing in the picture. He's now putting the alphabet in order. And then, of course, saying his ABCs very slowly to get that one-to-one correspondence. And some of our data, and it might be hard to see in the picture, but some of our data has helped us because some of the letters that he has missed in some of the scores, we use a yellow highlighter to mark. So that when I come over and I see, oh, you finished stretching them out, you know, what is this letter? I'm specifically asking him the letters that he's having trouble with and what sound does this make? So if you're noticing some are yellow, that's intentional because that is our progress monitoring tool to help them practice the letters in need. Okay, Esteban, I apologize, it's a student taking the video.
Wonderful. And if I ask you some questions, let's see. What sound do these two letters make? Yeah, like hat. And what is the label of this letter here? How do it looks like this? Is it still a B? Yeah. Yeah, uppercase B and lowercase b. And what sound does B make? The ball. What sound does this letter make? Say ah. Egg. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Esteban. Thank you, Ellen, for taking everything.
Oh, and I started her again.
So during our win time, which is our what I need time, we have all of our students split up in between the three of us and then our one reading interventionist. This year, only 4 students can meet with that one reading interventionist. So to help with such a big need for us in first grade, we decided to incorporate LLI, which is another reading program, intervention program that really hones in on those skills that our students need. The letters knowledge, the sound knowledge, and then that one-to-one correspondence that Jody's talking about, pointing to letters, pointing to words in stories. So we have a maximum of 9 to 10 students in our groups because of the supplies that we have for those students. And that's what it's showing here in this, is that program that we're using to really help strengthen the skills.
So this is an example of the data we will collect informally when we're not giving the PALS test, and this just shows you one student's scores and how maybe since the first month was November and then how the improvements are in, September and then again November. It'll also easy to note which letters in specific students are struggling with, and this gives us a good chance to show you that we are having some success. 5 of 8 students in Mrs. Stone's class are now proficient. 7 of the 8 students in my bunch are now proficient, and 1 of the 4 in Mrs. Gashin's class are now reaching proficient in alphabet sounds.
Can I ask a quick question on that? Are you using different techniques that would show you why someone's 7 out of 8 versus 1 out of 4? Like, is it just the student mix, or is it different? Is there a different approach that?
I think our approach is very similar.
I agree, and
For trying different things?
since we can meet so much, we do a lot of the same universal instruction like Jody is talking about. We really do all of the same things in our classroom, and how we teach and use the same posters and all of those things to really hone in on those skills.
And even the things that might not be in the program that we have purchased, we decide, oh, the children are really having a hard time deciding between B and D. We're all going to use the same worksheet, we're all going to put the same poster on the wall, and now hopefully they won't get B and D confused because we've all done the same enrichment or supplemental activities. So some of the classrooms are reaching more success than others, so our logical thought is, what's our next step? Well, we could use this information and now enhance our PALS spelling scores, which we know they're going to need those alphabet skills to use on that spelling test. The third test Britt was talking about in the beginning is a snap words or sight words test, and we could also start deep diving into that data and finding some similar activities to boost children up in those categories. So the next time we meet, we'll probably be working on that while continuing this to make sure all students gain proficiency. That may be it. Does anyone have any more questions for us?
I have one.
If any of these 8 in each of your classrooms, or the 4 and the 1, say at the end of the year they're not proficient in this, they've shown that they can't make it happen, what's the next step?
So there's quite a few steps between then and now. One of the first steps was changing our universal instruction, giving those children the alphabet steps, giving them during win time in one of these targeted groups. But before then, more red flags will come up. If by mid-year in January when we're assessing, a few more red flags will pop up, and then we start having conversations that maybe we need to change our groupings. There is a small group of 4 students who does see Mrs. School including interventionist, and maybe one of our students needs to go back in that group. She progress monitors that, and those are the students who we're keeping a very, very close eye on, and in hopes that if they need more than what a typical classroom can give, Mr. Sherwood can help guide us through those steps. And it does happen from time to time, but we're fairly confident that we can really turn the tables on some of this data. You have a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
And I think some of this goes back to the very beginning, when we shared the data on some of the needs that your students have. I seem to recall a fair amount indicated a referral to speech therapy. Now, I know that I've read a lot of things about how the masking for little children really affected speech. Where are they getting that speech therapy? Do we have someone coming from Seesaw? Do we?
Great question. Most of the students who are identified and noted up there as having speech services, I think were noted from before they were even in 4K. I think it's a 3-year-old service, so when we screen the students, they come in. But we do have Luanna Rose, who is our speech pathologist. She works in our building 3 days a week, and so she services all of our students year after year.
And how often, she's in the building 3 days a week, so does she see each student each day?
That depends on their IEP and how it's written for their personal goals. Some students do see her every day, some students see her once a week.
Okay.
Their minutes are in their IEP.
Oh,
It's our specific
okay.
minutes, but all the students' needs are met.
Yeah.
So we get the services that we need to meet all of their needs.
Some students are 10 minutes 3 times a week, some are 30 minutes once a week. It all kind of depends on what each student needs.
Okay. And then is there support or follow-up that the classroom teacher or an aide provides
For those speech students?
for those speech students? Or is it just you go see the speech therapist and then you're off on your way?
Luann, our speech therapist, does a wonderful job of connecting with teachers.
Okay.
So she's there, she's supporting, she sees what we have up, those posters. We send those posters with her to anchor those same sounds. There are some students who do come with a one-on-one aid, but I don't think that it's speech-based aid services. I think there are other things that are requiring an aid to be with the child.
It'll even be those books that we're reading with the kids, we'll send with her to speech, that she'll work on the books that are in their book bin that we're reading in first grade with them too. So it's really magical.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I just have one more, and maybe it's for you, maybe it's for Heather, maybe it's for Jason. Is there anything you need from the board as you're doing it? I mean, you've clearly identified, you obviously have some work to do around, what has happened over the last couple years. And it's also the most critical time, right?
Amen.
Right? For students to not have this follow them forever, right? So do you feel like you have all the support that's needed? Or is there something the board can do, knowing everything that you have? Or are you feeling grounded with where that's at? And from the teacher, Heather, Jason, can we do something else to help?
I think one of our biggest concerns is the fact that we have gone from 2 reading specialists down to 1, but I'm not sure that you can do anything about it. We know that the music position needed to be filled and Joe needed to serve a need. Ideally, we need another interventionist back. I do feel that when we had both reading interventionists, it was very effective and first grade's needs had been met. So if you can come up with another reading specialist, we're all in. And hopefully in the years to come, that will be a reality again. Would you agree?
I would agree. I mean, we're doing the best that we can with what we know how to do, but we can't just make a person another, somebody up here, so.
I appreciate that. Thank you for letting us know what that would look like.
The importance of that role. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Right, next, we'll do the district administrator update.
Is this, are you gonna be showing like report card stuff on this?
Yes.
I can't really see it or is there any way I could just get it emailed so that I could pull it up on or could it get added to the board portal so I could,
Can you
do that right now?
Can you do that right now?
So I can pull it up, otherwise I have to move because I can't see.
I
I
can't
can't.
see it very well later.
I don't wanna miss this.
I will have it like this. Can you see that?
I can't read the writing. I can read growth and I can read priority areas.
I'm going to share the document with all of you right now.
Excellent, thank you.
That would be great.
So you should, be able
This is
to-
important stuff. I don't want to miss it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
bear with me for a moment. Okay, so you all have, I just emailed you all a direct link to, you'll be able to click on it and open
Thank you.
I'll start with, before we get into that, let's go to the resolution piece. Demo. So this probably should have been under celebrations. But as you all know, I had communicated with you last week that kudos to all of you and to Pam. The resolution developed and submitted was accepted and will be presented to the
The whole Pittsville.
Yeah.
Pittsville, yep. So
We'll have our name.
First time, I
Yeah,
think,
it's impressive.
we've done this. Yes,
Right.
yes.
So kudos to the board and to Pam for working on this draft and submitting. And so this will be presented to WASB, the full delegate assembly. So we had our junior high play last week, Christmastown. We have some photos shared with you here, the cast. Wonderful job by all. Karen Garrels and Jody Moore facilitated that along with who else? Heather, there were other adults that helped? No? Okay, mainly, but phenomenal job. It was nice to get kids after a hiatus, get kids back in and get everybody into the Fine Arts Center for the presentation. So there's some photos here. We have some very talented young people that participated in that. The 5th through 8th grade band and choir presented last week, had a concert. Mrs. Verix and Mr. Wigert did a wonderful job with those students, specifically when you have the 5th graders, where it's their first organized. As the parent of a 5th grade band student, I was impressed because if you put musical instruments in the hands of 10-year-olds like that, especially in large numbers, it was very impressive, the work that they've been able to do. The same thing with the choirs. Fun time was had by all. Small but mighty, we like to say. They're not large in numbers, but certainly, and I think through the last couple of years, I think that's something you saw statewide is our music programs, performance arts, the numbers tended to drop statewide in schools like, without having that performance piece, and there were a lot of restrictions out there. So it's gonna take a little bit of time to get kids back involved, but it's a good start to get us back where we're having the plays and the concerts. Winter sports are off to a strong start, in full swing here. The boys and girls basketball team, the wrestling team had their first duel last week, and they had a tournament during the weekend. They won the duel, 48-12, I believe, and then they took 6 out of 18 teams at the Black River Falls Invite over the weekend. That is the team poster that's going to be coming out. Some photos from the wrestlers. The girls basketball team off to a strong start as well. Their poster was also done by, give credit to Don Patterson, and he had given us permission to use those on here. He does a wonderful job with the photos. 5-1 overall, and they're 2-0 in the CWC South right now. Yeah. Any comments about how the season's going so far?
I mean, I'm having a lot of fun, so it's going well.
The comment I made to a couple of the girls is what I'm impressed by is they're very unselfish. That they distribute the ball well. Like a lot of team play. It's impressive to watch. So off to a strong start. Boys basketball team, we have a player in here as well. Sam, you see what I was talking about now? The Ballman. I asked him if he could stick him on his hand. That's not easy to do, folks. So they're off to they're 4-0 overall, and they're 1-0 in CWC South right now. And I would tell you, Coach Dennison says he credits that strong start to his defense, good team defense. All right. So tonight is the night we're going to present the school district report card data for the 22-23 school year. I want to start off by saying, as most of you are aware, this will be the data, it's the previous year's data we're presenting. And one thing we always talk about when presenting data, one of the problems with standardized testing data is it takes so long for us to get the results back. It's hard to utilize it. One wants to be able to use this data in the year, which is why, Chris, you had asked the question about, what do we do if students, if we get to the end of the year, that's the importance for that, to do frequent assessment, progress monitoring with students throughout the year and see where kids are at. However, this is a snapshot and it's data that we use, the report card. Want to go to the next slide? So the Department of Public Instruction produces these report cards every year for any publicly funded school districts in the state of Wisconsin. This score, it's based on a 100-point scale. It's calculated by combining weighted average from priority or area scores. I'm going to kind of give you an overview here, and then Mrs. Friday and Dr. Watson and Mr. Sherwood are going to go through and kind of break down the individual report cards. So I just want to kind of give you that 30,000-foot view of what does this report card look like? What data does it include? So the 4 priority areas that you'll see on there that they focus on: student achievement, that's that knowledge and skills that they have attained compared against the state standards for ELA and math. And those are, and I'll get into it later again, through the Aspire and ACT exams for 9th and 10th grade, the Aspire, and then ACT for our juniors for high school. Growth, how rapidly are they gaining knowledge? That's important. We want to focus on student growth from year to year, and the closing of gaps, that's a big one, is that you focus on your target groups. Typically, you would see those would be students with disabilities, low SES, socioeconomic status students, and other groups. And then what do the gaps look like between those groups and other student groups? And the idea would be is that you want to try to close those gaps without sacrificing that your upper tier staying stagnant. You want to try to show growth, and it needs to be accelerated growth with your targeted groups as you go through it. And then on track and post-secondary readiness, like, are the measures where they're at, those milestones are predicting how they're going to do later. 3rd grade reading is a predictor you hear about. That's a measure that typically, there's a lot of data that by 3rd grade students are reading proficiently. They're going to be playing catch up for the entire way through at that point. So there's certain areas that are key identifiers, like where are we at and what do we need to work on and what do we need to do. Next slide, please. So those are the data sources used, the ACT Aspire, and that's given in grades 9 and 10. The ACT with writing is given to juniors. The DLM, and Matt can maybe address that. That's a kind of alternative assessment given to our students with the most typically significant cognitive disabilities. It's a modified version. Matt, if you want to elaborate at all.
So the students take DLM would be our students who have qualified with intellectual disability. So they have scored 2 standard deviations below on a cognitive test. And as an IEP team, we determined that test is more suited to their needs compared to taking the forward, the ACT Aspire, or the ACT.
Thank you, Matt. And then the forward exam for grades 3 through 8. So if you see a district typically, so number one, your seniors, there's no data included for current seniors, obviously, that's included in the report card. And then if you're in a district that has a breakup of schools where you have like a K2 building, they don't have a report card score. They don't get a score. They get data, but there's no report card score that comes out for those buildings. Our building, because it's a K8 building, they get a score as a K8 building, but the data included is the 3rd through 8th grade forward exam. So I hope that kind of helps kind of break things down a little bit. So Heather, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Watson and Mr. Sherwood. And please feel free to ask questions or ask for clarifications as we go through this.
So this is just the history of district report card score, and you can kind of see, unfortunately, we have a decline. So it slowly goes down. And the school district is 66.3, the high school is 65.2, and the elementary is 66.1. And we are, we meet expectations.
Can I point something out in there, Heather?
Say it again?
Can I point something out? On the slide, folks, if you look at this, you see that doesn't average well. So like how could you have a 65.2 and a 66.1 that averages at 66.3? It's because they divide the pie differently. So those priority scores get divided differently as a district than they do as a school. So long story short, it doesn't make a ton of sense when you try to look at it that way. But your achievement scores, your growth scores, and your target outcomes are different for each level. That's why it was.
So, do you have a question?
Well, I need to digest this a little bit. So, okay, that's the ranges, and you can get 5 stars if you're between 83 and 100.
Correct.
Okay, now, I recall that, last year's report card, the ranges, I think, changed. DPI changed the ranges in terms of the raw score, that they adjusted the ranges, so despite learning loss in the pandemic, there was still, the majority of the schools in the state at least met expectations.
Yeah, and I can't, Marion, I'm not familiar that if they changed those accountability to score ranges themselves. I know they changed the value added pieces, like they changed some of what went into the data, but I don't know specifically, and I'm not saying you're wrong on that, but I don't know if they specifically changed they changed the way the scores were calculated, the data that went into the calculations.
And you could be correct, and I could have tried to simplify it.
Yeah, they tried to put more emphasis on student growth, and effectively, I guess to oversimplify this is if you had an opportunity for more dynamic growth on your report card if you had significant growth in some of your targeted groups. So if you had a district that had a lot of high number of students with disabilities and you showed significant growth with your students with disabilities, that had a higher weighted factor for your score. So your overall score, and it was trying to effectively, what they were indicating is trying to level the playing field a little bit more for, like, if you had a district, if you're dealing with a ton of students that have significant needs in a district, they felt as if they wanted to put more emphasis on you showing growth with those targeted students than just if you happen to have, where you had lower numbers of students with disabilities, that the expectation would be, I guess, that you would, and once again, this is oversimplifying things, that you would be able to show more growth so that there was more value added to those subgroups or those targeted groups. Like we have a significant number of students here in Pittsville in the low SES category. 39.7% of our families fall into a low socioeconomic status. So there's a lot that goes into. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. I knew there was some.
Yep. I don't think it was the ranges. I think it was the formula that went into how the score was determined. They adjusted. That's happened 3 of the last 4 years. They didn't have a report card in 1920. There was no report card. They did the hiatus, but they've changed how things are factored in. There were significant changes made last year, but they've changed stuff every year as far as how the calculations. It's been kind of a moving target.
Okay.
Well, note that next year will be quite different too, because the Inspire's going.
Correct.
So it's a major metric for the high school for 2 of our grades. There's a completely different test now. Yeah. So, but the whole state will have the same problem.
Is it graded on improvement if we have more people in that?
Well, effectively, that's what it is, Nate, absolutely. It's graded on a curve almost because of those, with your student groups that are identified.
So someplace like Harlan where they have a lot of money would have different growth goals?
Effectively, it would be more difficult for them to change their score because, yes, once again, it's a bit way oversimplified explanation, but yes, effectively, students who had, if you start as a lower performing district, there's more potential to if you are able to focus on targeted groups of students that are identified there to make more growth quickly. Once again, this is, as I would indicate, this is a snapshot. This report card is of data from a handful of tests. So what we try to do is, this is data we like to look at, right? Because it's data. However, to put all your eggs in this basket of saying we are going to completely change the way we do things because of these scores would be very naive of us. Is what we look at is we look for trends. That's why it's nice to be able to we can take cohort data and look at 3-year trend data to see, are there some trends that you saw first grade when they, tonight when they did their demonstration, talking about where they look for areas in the class, like where are students struggling, like with the phonics and those pieces, look for those types of things. And then, okay, so obviously this is something we've identified, we're gonna focus instruction here. And what it really always comes down to is focusing on tier 1 instruction. Like what are we doing on a daily basis in the classroom to support students? And then you do certainly you would, in one of their slides, I think they had how they do targeted interventions during wind time, where they identify groups of students who maybe are struggling with specific pieces of that, and then you focus on that, but focusing on your tier 1 instruction. So we use this data because it is good to look at areas that we're doing well in, but we need to remember this is a test. This is data from effectively from a single test, from the forward exam, from the Aspire, from the ACT. We combine that with what we see with our progress monitoring data that we have here through the school teacher input, and it's a holistic approach to looking for things that we know, all right, what are we going to focus on? Because we have limited resources. We have to decide what areas are we going to focus on, and tier 1 instruction is always a good place to start to focus on what we're doing in our tier 1 instruction. I believe Dr. Watson has a slide later where you talk about the tier 1, 2, and 3, the different, I thought so. I don't want to steal this thunder, but that's a great question.
The same evaluation from 3 years ago. This isn't like a brand new way of evaluating. It's the same tests were used 3 years ago.
Same tests are used. Way back, the Badger was used before Forward came about. They switched from the Badger exam to the Forward exam after 2 years. So what that made really difficult was, Nate, is we were focused on areas, and we were looking at like sub-scores in the Badger, and then they switched to the Forward. Well, the data didn't translate well. So we had that 2 years of data with the Badger, and then it was like, when you start to look at, okay, let's watch this cohort as they went through, well, now it's a different test. Now, however, there are correlations that we can look for with specific standards and skills that we want to see kids develop.
So all these tests these are throughout the school year, and they're not all at once, or like, there's a big chunk of them, and most of them I know are right at about the exact same time.
These are all.
So these calculations are from the current, obviously it goes into 2022.
Yeah.
So I guess what would be a good date range, we could say this is where our new starting point is going to.
So I want to touch on that first part, because that's a good point to bring up, is that, so these tests take place in the spring. So you're testing these kids in the spring. So the data you're seeing, and we don't get the data back until the fall of that year. So they test in the spring of 2022. We get the data back in the fall of 2022. The ACT data, we get a little bit, Dr. Watson, when did that come back? ACT data, we get the preliminary stuff.
Yeah, we get, in the summer, we'll get the spring ACT, the October ACT, so we got that data like 3 days ago.
Yeah.
So it's still about 2 months late.
Yeah. So it's hard, and it is a one-shot deal. Like the forward exam is they're taking it over a period of days within a range. They give a testing window that you can test within. Same thing with the ACT data. So it's this may sound like excuse making, but we don't tend to put too much into this, whether it's the high highs or the low lows. We look for trends and for things that jump out, like things that confirm things that maybe that we're seeing on a daily basis in our classrooms, those type of things. Because when you're taking a window of time like that, what kind of things can impact it with a kid? You're sick, you're not feeling well. There's something going on at home, can have an impact on those types of things. But it is data that we look at, because we do find some useful information, and we'll present some stuff later that gives us a good kind of overview of things we're doing well and things we probably need to focus on. Go ahead.
So what I tried to do is just kind of show you where we are compared to the state. So if you look here, we're slightly above the state average in ELA and math, so we're 64.4, and the state average is 59.5. So you can see that we're just slightly above in both of those areas for achievement.
Is that a percentile, or since we're slightly above the state average? So this would be the state weighted average.
Percent proficient.
Percent
of students proficient.
Okay, that's
So
different.
59.5% students, the state average would be proficient in that area. We scored 64.4 of our students. So more of our students scoring proficient than the state average. Are we still satisfied that we have, 35.6% of our students? No, of course not. And that's something that we work towards. I mean, the ultimate goal would be to get 100% of our students proficient.
And then in the area of achievement, we are higher than 65.7 of the K-8 schools we're compared to. So, all right, that's achievement. This is our ELA forward exam over the 3 years. And so Obviously, the orange and yellow, we would like to see decrease, because that's below basic and basic, and the other two we want to increase. So you can see that we have a slight increase in below basic. We have a decrease in basic, which is a positive. And then you, from here to here, we have a decrease, but we did increase from last year to this year. So that's a positive, but then we kind of continue to go down with our advanced kids. So that's our ELA. And then this is the forward math exams, same thing. We have an increase in below basic performance. We're seeing a decrease in our basic, and then we have an increase in our proficient, and then again, we see that decrease in advanced. So then this is the growth, how fast we're growing compared to others, and so we are slightly below the state average in both areas. And then here, we, compared to all the other schools, we are only higher than 12.9% in the area of growth. So that means we're not making as much growth as fast as we would like.
Okay, Deb, can you, sorry, Deb's gonna bring up, I wanted you to see, this is a good visual. It's page 4, I believe. So this is off the actual report card here. And there's one of these for the district. This happens to be the district one. Can you scan down to?
This is growth.
Yep, go down to that value added chart, the one with the, right here. So this particular piece of the report card for each of the buildings in the district is a good visual to see where we're at. So I'll explain very briefly what this is. So if you go back to the top, just scan up a little bit. So this is the priority area score in growth, and this is for the district. If you scan down now.
Okay, so we have to go.
This one,
What
she may
slide
have
is
to.
this?
It's not a slide.
Yeah, this one you may have to, if you want to move around, move around, and I can share this with you after the meeting. And it's actually available when I sent the links out to the report cards. If you pull in a PDF, this is page 4 on there. So what this talks about, language arts, math, that line you see down the middle is average, what would be expected out of, if you see each of those student groups. So if you look on the left where it says economically disadvantaged, it gives the number of our students who qualify as economically disadvantaged in parentheses there. And then you can see where our number is at 2.4? Yeah, a 3 is considered average growth. So what that says is this: economically disadvantaged students in the Pittsville School District, our students are growing at a slower rate than students of that demographic that are also identified as low SES students statewide. Okay, the goal is you want to be to the right of that line and in the dark blue. So as you can see over with our math, what that indicates is all of our subgroups of students that are identified. And why you only see some subgroups, if there's 20 or less students in that subgroup, they're not identified because of it would be too easy to identify individual students with a small group. But in our students where we have students that we can identify those subgroups, we are in dark blue and we're to the right of that line, which means our students of those groups are growing at a faster rate than students statewide. So this is valuable for us to look at. So an example, when we had the CISA data specialist break this down with us, and Rod, Heather, feel free to jump in. What she said is, looking at our ELA, is that there are no outliers. So you see how they're all right around that 2.4, 2.5. What she says is that would indicate there are no student groups in your district that are lagging way behind. Like that's good tier 1. Like it means you're doing some good things with your tier 1 instruction supporting students. Because what you don't want to see is if you saw like your students, your English learners, okay? If we had more than 20 where that could be identified, if that was way below, that would be an indicator to us. We need to focus more resources on supporting our English language learners because we're well below. When you see this, what it means is we need to continue to do work on our tier 1 instruction, but there are no subgroups that are falling way behind in our district. That's what that was the takeaway.
Okay, there's no subgroups falling behind, but overall, as a district, we are not seeing appropriate growth.
I wouldn't,
Because
I don't know if I would say appropriate, I would say this: we're not showing as quick of growth as some other districts. You know, certainly are we striving to student growth is what it's all about, but yes, that effectively what this says is that our students are growing in those subgroups at a slower rate than similar students in those subgroups statewide.
Yeah.
Okay, do you, Deb, you wanna pull up the elementary one? I'm just gonna show all three of these right away. So this is the
That's
the high school one here. So here's the same thing broken down by just high school students. So what you saw was all of our district students in those groups. So as you can see here, similar, you can see math, we're knocking it out of the park with the math growth scores here. Because those, the further to the right, the better. You want to see your groups over there. So what we're looking at, and what's really impressive, I would be honest with you and tell you, is that this was something I think I pointed out during the interview process. Statewide through COVID, a lot of districts saw their math scores lag drastically because kids kept reading at home through. A lot of kids still read at home through COVID when they were in instruction and saw their math scores like. Pittsville's kind of an outlier when it comes to that, like that we had math growth that showed that's unusual. That's not something you would see statewide, but that shows that our math scores are above in all of those groups. The English language arts, once again, just slightly below, but again, as she said, there was nothing that really was like, boy, this is just like really concerning to us. And I would tell you why this is data that you would expect to see, why they focus on like economically disadvantaged as a subgroup to watch, is that if you are in a household where you're dealing with a family, economically disadvantaged family, you may have where kids are maybe caring for siblings, and there are other components that you're not going to have that time to read 3 books in the evening and things. And I know this sounds like I'm generalizing, but effectively, that's why we try to focus on groups that may end up not having the resources available to be able to do things. And then it's up to us to try to find out how can we support those students and those particular groups of students. So this was something that the data specialist at CSEP pulled out for us, these particular charts. You want to pull up the
How
elementary?
come those numbers vary between the two? Like looks like there's just like 2 more kids doing math and not doing the other stuff.
Where are you looking at?
You know, like for the not economically
Yep, okay.
So 79 for that one, and on the right it's 81.
Yep, so that I don't know how would that, principals help me with that. It's a good catch, Nate. I don't know how two would have identified more.
Yeah,
I'm gonna find out from Nate. That's a great question. Okay, so here's the elementary data, same chart. So once again, what you looked at was you're looking for what areas would you see any subgroups that are way below, and that's not the case in this situation. What this shows is continued focus on our tier 1 instruction in your classroom through the PLCs. Okay, I thought those particular components are nice visuals and kind of give us a snapshot of things. So
Can I point some out, Jason?
yeah, of course.
So it's very tempting to look at data like this as if it's an autopsy, and we'll try to figure out like, what happened. And then for some kids it is, like for my students that took it as juniors, their education at this point in December of their senior year is set, like they're on their path. But for a lot of times you don't look at this and say, this is a checkup, we gotta figure out how we're doing.
Yeah.
And so you saw with the high school data that our growth scores in English aren't good enough yet. So that's exactly what we want to talk to our English department about, and it's exactly what we did. Like, okay, so this is the data, why is that? That's the problem we solve, we have time to solve it, we're able to do it. You also see evidence that supports what we already knew, our math teachers are excellent, right? Like, so even if your achievement scores aren't there, your growth scores are excellent, that doesn't happen on accident, like Mr. Not, but now you're not doing math at home usually, this is math that's growing because your teacher's helping you get there. And so, yeah, we look at this data, and I also heard Mr. Not point this out, we only have 40 kids taking the ACT.
Yep.
One student being sick that day or feeling sick and taking the test anyway, it moves the data. Like other schools I've worked in, that doesn't happen. So you gotta be careful of over celebrating or over mourning data. We also look at those trends and say, okay, we're seeing significantly lower growth with our reading scores, especially when students have lower social emotional or social economic needs. How are we not reaching that group? What do we do, right? And that's what this data is useful for. That's why we present it.
Okay. All right, Heather. Thank you for allowing me to indulge in those charts.
All right, so this is where we are with our target groups. Now, what it doesn't show is how it compares to the non-target groups. So if you look at the achievement score, 19.5%, hold on, that doesn't have the same one. That one has a pretty big gap between the target group and the non-target group. So our target group is not achieving as high as our non-target group. With the growth, I'm trying to think if maybe I don't.
Can you
I'm
explain
thinking of
the
math and
target
ELA, I'm
group
trying
is?
to, they're divided in mine, sorry. So for the math, the target group is 16.7 and the non-target group is 70.6. So it's not shown on here, it's a different component in here. So it just breaks it down as far as the math and ELA.
Those are those low SES and.
Oh, I just know what I was looking at.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Sorry.
So we do have a large gap in between the achievement between our target group and our non-target group. And then with our growth, those are pretty similar. So our target group is growing similar to our non-target group. And the rest of them are pretty similar.
The problem is that we need that target group to have a slightly more accelerated growth at minimum to catch, because we want them to be able to get to the point where they catch up. If they show similar growth with that gap, effectively you would see no gains. That group would never catch up.
Right. And so then if you look at this one, our scores are slightly higher than the state average. And if you look when Jason talked about the 3rd grade reading and the 8th grade math, if you look, our 3rd grade reading is a decent amount higher than the state. So we do really well in those areas of our 8th grade math and our 3rd grade reading scores. And attendance is a little bit higher than the state average, so. And then that has significantly increased. Like if we look at the years prior, we're looking at like 2.3% absenteeism and 4.0, and then this year is 15.9. So definitely increasing, but we obviously know their kids are staying home when they're sick, so.
And we all know the importance of attendance. If kids are here, if they're feeling connected and engaged here in school, the learning is going to effectively happen.
So these are just a few next steps. For the last few years, we have been reviewing our current math curriculum resources. Grades 6 through 8 have implemented the IM resources. We're looking at possibly implementing those K-5. We've been using Envision since I've been here, and we updated maybe my 2nd year because we didn't want another big change, but the teachers are definitely looking for a possible change. And so we are going to go to Edgar, where they have implemented both resources at the middle school and the elementary school and have seen significant increases in their test scores, and they really like the resource. So we're looking at that as far as a change next year. And then as the 1st grade team said, they're definitely looking at our Lucy Calkins reading, writing, and phonics and saying, where are the gaps and what do we need to do to fix those? So, and then just our PLC work continued during the release time.
Okay, same thing as what Heather pointed out with elementary school. We were very close to the state on both areas for achievement. We were below the state, so the bottom line is that our achievement scores lag behind the state and not where we want to be. However, we have a lot of reason to be proud of the next 2 charts. I'll give you a second to absorb this one. Note the big gap with no 1920 depicted. So my takeaway on this one, Joe over to the right, obviously our proficiency is not as high as you want. You never want any students to not be proficient. That's the goal of school, proficiency and readiness. However, I think you don't want to compare yourself to other people too much, but pull out some other state report cards and school district report cards right now, right? And look at how other districts are doing with the time that they were closed, the time that they lost their students to engagement. They didn't see their provision block rise like we did, and almost nobody saw advanced rise. And I know it's only 2 students, so those are 2 students that are now ready for college, right? So like that's good stuff, and this once again doesn't happen on accident. This is good teaching.
Well, and you also went from 86 students to 70.
Yeah.
That are in the basic or below basic, and while, like you said, 70 is still too many.
Right.
It isn't 86.
And that's 17 students moving into proficiency, that
Right.
all kinds of doors open for you at that point. And I know this is something I think you may have heard me say when we talked about using the ACT as a district goal of trying to get everybody to 21. You might think, well, what if I'm not going to a 4-year college? Does that really matter? Well, there's no job for turning it down to do well in the ACT, right? Like those things doing well in the ACT shows you can do well at almost anything. It's one of those skill sets in addition to being a good person and a good worker and things like that, that just prepares you for success. So a good school helps their students be ready in case they decide to go on to post-secondary training and you're not ready if you're not proficient on these tests. So here's math, and we can see again more evidence that our math teachers are crushing it. When you get this many students during a pandemic jumping to advanced, this is because they're taking the advanced math classes, right? These are classes that often quite small in our school, but they're really good classes. And so there's a lot of reason to be concerned here. And I know if you ask our math teachers, they are concerned about this. It's something we're working on, as you see in the later slide. But I also want to take a second to point out that we sustained or grew in a time that was pretty tough for public education. So here's our growth scores, and as you can see, we have one to be very concerned about, and we have one to be very elated about. That's exactly what those departments are doing with those scores. On track to graduate, my bottom line here was that our attendance numbers suffered during the pandemic, and that wasn't all students that didn't want to come to school or were sick. It was a lot of contact tracing, a lot of students that had to stay home. And the engagement while they're at home wasn't strong. We also lost, even students in school lost some of their engagement throughout this time. And so when your absentee numbers look like this, that's going to help you. That's going to cause students to struggle in lots of other areas too. But our graduation rates are excellent. If you're in our school and you make the senior year, you're going to graduate. You saw last year, the one that we had to get through to the finish line later in the summer. We never give up on our students. That's a very good graduation rate. Target group outcomes. This is comparing our students with low socioeconomic status to see their peers and figure out are they growing at the right rates. They're not achieving at the rates of their peers, but they're growing at a very rapid rate, and it's good. The graduation rate. Most schools can't point to graduations like rates like that for students who have some of the decks in the cards stacked against them. So I'm proud of that.
That was the link for that, already what I presented. You can skip that slide.
No further comment on that one. So I want to point this out that when you look at this slide, and when you look at the school report card and you're defending it to your friends, whatever setting you do that in, that this is always a year behind. Not just last year, it's the year before. And that our industry recognized credentials is just not accurate on that slide. It isn't for most of my peers in the Central Wisconsin Conference either. And so we all have students in the small schools that look like us that I meet with once a month. We all have students that are getting those industry recognized certificates and they're not reporting on the school report card. So this part of it is kind of useless in that way. I did put some information from Mr. Hadfield in the next slide in case you are wondering how we're doing. You can go back one real quick. I want to point out the advanced courses. What I don't like about the way the report card does, by the way, it's all just data. This part doesn't go into your exceeds or meets. This is just information. But what they're looking for here is the students are taking advanced classes. And I'm far less interested in that than I am if they're doing well in those classes and enjoying them. Right. So that's why we revamped some of the AP offerings, and that's why we're going to move to a different AP segment. I'll tell you about a later date. So you will see those numbers. Right now we're right pretty close to how the state's doing. You'll see those numbers dip next year because we didn't offer AP Human Geography or AP Psych. We didn't have the teachers to teach that. Next year when we offer things back, it'll be less than it was, but hopefully it's very enhanced about it. Okay, Mr. Hadfield put the slide together for you. As you can see, this continues to be what we do the best in our school doesn't often show up in the meets, exceeds, expectations part of the report card. Because if you are in this building during the day, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of proud of what they do here, so I don't want to brag too much, but it's pretty extraordinary stuff. I didn't get to do this stuff when I was in school, where I actually go on job shadows and do an internship and really have a career path set before me before I graduate, instead of just a bunch of classes and memories and dances and things. So this is really cool stuff. 19 students on track to have an industry recognized certificate that will make them far more employable when they graduate. And then as you can see here, we're trending up, or at least having very strong youth apprenticeship numbers. And then the areas here are areas of need in the workforce right now. Dual credit classes, this is gold. If you can get a class in high school that is going to get you credit when you go to college in the mid-state system or in other areas too, that's just money in the bank. And so you can say it continues to be a strong focus in our school, and we have a lot of courses available for that. Okay, I won't go into too much detail on this. I just want to point out that this is when we think about how we improve these numbers, before we had time for early release or a real coherent strategy, it was kind of teach harder was our goal. You know, like just teach better and learn better, and then we'll get better next year. But then we're really only gonna move like minutia. And so everyone's teaching as hard as they can, right? That's the tier one. But sometimes the students don't get it, or they already had it before they walked in the room. So then we get to tier. Did I do that?
Yep.
Yes, you did. I made that. All right, let's do it here. So tier two is where we have that Panther Pride time. We have enrichment activities that are designed. And so some students can take advantage of that, do some enrichment stuff, or they can come in because they didn't do very well on the math test and they can get some extra training. We have that built in. If we didn't have that, we'd have to do it. Right. And so, and then tier three is some students we know they're going to struggle in the class before they ever take it. We have all the data in the world to suggest this. We give them intervention, or we have advanced learner plans. We have some students that we know they're going to be bored in most of the classes. They were at that grade level 2 years ago. And so then we have advanced learner plans for those students. This is how, when you're a small and mighty district, you can know your students before you even have them in the room, because you have systems set up for them. So this is kind of a depiction of what that looks like. I can go more into detail on that some other time. I will let you read all that. But I just want to, the main idea here is that we don't improve these numbers by just teaching harder and learning faster. And I think that we have to be strategic about it, and we have our early release time for that. These are the questions that my team is really mulling over in this. How do we, the one that Mr. Woden asked me last year that has been echoing in my mind since we did that early release time was, how will we know if it's effective? And I think part of it is that this report card tells you, like, it's kind of like getting on the scale once a year to find out if your diet plan's working. It's probably not enough time. And I don't know if you're not allowed to mention that around the holiday season because we don't have scales, but no, we have to have more metrics than that. That's a common form of assessment. Ms. Ned told me to lead a staff meeting next week. We're getting into that in a little more detail, where we're measuring our most important proficiency ratings throughout the year, and then look at that data and saying, hey, how come your kids do better than mine? What are you doing right? Right? And so like that's what that early step does. It's powerful. And then continuously, we have some really amazing learners. I just saw a few of them in the band concert that are doing college level work in high school. We have to challenge those kids. That's really important. And then finally, our report card is doing something different than our class are doing right now. It's taking that work the students are doing and it's boiling it into a Carnegie unit, a grade that doesn't quite match. And so most districts that look like us are moving toward more of a standards-based grade system, while respecting the fact that the traditional system helps with scholarships and college admissions. So we might need a more progressive report card moving forward. We are thinking about that. And the third bullet point is available.
Yeah.
Dr. Watson referenced, Julie, your question during the first grade presentation about when the teachers break down that data by class is like what's happening. Dr. Watson just touched on it. It's like, hey, what are you doing in your classroom? That's the importance of that collaboration.
Well, the difference, and again, I mean, I think there's just so much to learn when you've implemented similar things in the same classrooms and one has 25% change and another has 80% change, right? Yeah. Like there's something about the 80% probably that is like.
Yep, and the only way to do that, Julie, is make sure you have the same kinds of tests, right? That we're all doing something common, because we can't say why you have apples and I have oranges and we both have fruit. Like it's got to be something where we're doing very similar tests, even if they're different grade levels. The sophistication is different. But I assigned a nonfiction reading, so did you. Your students understanding it better than mine. Please help me with that. How did you explain it? What tools did you use? Or maybe you can't explain it well. I need to come in for an observation, right? Because we're a team. We can't teach in silos. And so this is what that time has allowed us to have that conversation and then figure out the next steps, I hope.
And kudos to staff for doing that. You make yourself very vulnerable in those conversations when you're sharing data and you're collaborating. And kudos to our staff; they're open to it and they're relying on each other to have those conversations. And I can't underscore enough how important that common assessment piece is to have those conversations, because if you're not assessing students similarly, it's hard to talk about the data that you're seeing and what you're doing in the classroom.
I think that's the last slide I had. Are there any questions in the high school report card or any of those numbers?
I just have a question in general. So there was a lot of comparison to like the state average.
Yeah.
I know you say you don't want to compare to everybody, but how do are you kind of evaluating how we compare against a school that's made up very similar to ours? Is that how, when you said we're going to Edgar to see what they're doing?
I can tell you one metric I use is our ACT score compared to all the other principals at the CBC meetings I go to. There's 21 principals and 20 some. And when I was bored to come with some sport that we don't have, like golf or something, I looked up all their ACT scores. I looked up ours, and we're the highest. And so I mentioned that occasionally.
And not that we're always not striving to even be better, which is awesome, but I do think that it's also important that students stay with us for us to get better.
Yeah.
And so scoring above where others are at, keep people here long enough to benefit from the fact that we're gonna continue to.
Heather showed you third grade
advance,
reading.
right?
She showed you the third grade reading numbers. I know for a fact that businesses and realtors are pointing to third grade reading numbers and trying to
Yeah.
decide whether to build a new
Well,
factory or a new home.
When I talk to a bank about coming into town, that's actually
Yeah.
what they look at is, that score to know whether or not the community will grow.
My wife and I
And do
looked
they
at,
want to be a bank in this town?
my wife and I looked at that before we decided to move.
What?
Third grade readings?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the major.
There's a lot of data behind it, 8th grade math, 3rd grade reading,
Oh.
there's
Yeah.
key performance indicators, yeah.
And by the way, they did pull it up for me and we're high enough that they would come to our area. So there you go.
Yeah.
But it's a huge deal because that's the growth of your town, right? I mean, like it's.
Well, it goes back to the whole thing. For the first 3 years, you learn to read,
Yeah.
and the next academically in your life, you read to learn.
Thank you for sharing all of that with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, principals. Matt is going to, Matt's our closer here, he's just gonna kind of tie everything together about, so we've talked about those targeted student groups. And Matt's gonna kind of reference like, what is it when we are aware that we have student groups, you know, the low SES group of 39%. What are some things that we do as a school district that we're focused on with those things? So that'll kind of give you an idea how we're supporting students in the district here through this.
Yeah, just to reiterate, I'm not going to go into data, quite like David, actually not at all. So I will break down a little bit of what student services does for our school. When I use the term student service, I'm talking about school counselors, school nurse, school psychologist, in this case, special education teachers, and our EL coordinator. So like all our staff, student service personnel aim to ensure our students feel healthy, safe, and supported. We are committed to supporting the instructional process by identifying and eliminating barriers to learning, advocating for the whole child's needs, and empowering all students. So again, for us, we really do focus on the whole child. It's not just the instruction because, again, our school counselors, school nurse, and school psychologists aren't necessarily providing direct instruction in any one academic area. But again, they serve a very large role for kiddos. So district employs our own school nurse. The first time since my tenure has begun, maybe forever, I'm not really sure.
Been forever.
Yep, I don't ever remember having one when I was in school. School nursing and health services are responsible for providing leadership in school nursing practice, school health policy, and school health programs. Mrs. Martinovich assists with education programs and related services for children with special health care needs, school health records, medication administration, and emergency services. So the last 5 years, we've literally had someone come once a week for a handful of hours. And again, that's all we really knew. So I think for us, we are currently going through a process where we have to truly figure out how to best utilize Mrs. Martinovich. Because one, she has tremendous background with her healthcare, and she also is a mother of our kids, or her kids, who are in our district, which is definitely different than the people we've had come in the past. We've employed them through a couple various outside sources, and they were very nice individuals, but they had no connection to our district. Our school counselors improve student outcomes through social and emotional support by building positive relationships and increasing school engagement to help concentrate on learning. We have partnered with Power Mental Health Clinic to provide individual counseling to students and look forward to a future partnership with Opportunity Development Centers, or ODC, and their mental health services. So a district our size, we do a phenomenal job, especially our school counselors, meeting those needs of our kids. We've also done a really good job of seeking out additional supports to have those outside services come in and provide individual counseling for our kids. So for a lot of our families, in the past, it's kind of been a situation where, well, I could go take my kid to counseling in Marshfield, but by the time I pick them up at 11 and get there and get back, the day's wasted.
If you
We're not
have
gonna do it.
appointments.
Yep,
Yes,
It's
they don't have a lot of capacity there.
absolutely. So for us to have that outside counseling service come in, we are very fortunate to provide that. The district also contracts school psychology services through CISA. That's something that we brought back in this year. School psychologists apply expertise in mental health, learning, and behavior to help students succeed academically, socially, behaviorally, and emotionally. That's also another one that we have to figure out how to best utilize our school psychologists, just because, again, it does free up a lot of time for myself, where I don't have to necessarily do some of the things that I was doing the past 5 years. But again, she is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to certain areas, and I think she's an untapped resource that we're very fortunate to have. The district has also added an EL coordinator as an instructional resource to teachers, support staff, and administrators for English learner programs. Mrs. Galvan also provides English acquisition instruction to our EL students. That is something I am very proud to sit here and say the board has always supported our EL kiddos. Obviously, a district our size, we do not have the same numbers as St. Abbotsford, but you guys have always been very supportive of making sure we put whatever we need to have in front of those kids. I think Mrs. Galvan is a perfect example of how moving forward we can best meet the needs of not just the EL families that we currently have, but potentially ones down the road, because I do think that we might not ever look like Abbotsford, but I do think that we will have more EL families moving to the district based on some conversations I've had with some employers in the district. Now, we also have restructured our special education department at the elementary school. We have added a staff member, allowing each member to have a more developmentally appropriate focus. So in the past, we've had 2 special education staff members at the elementary, which would have been early childhood through 4th grade and then 5th through 8th grade. From a caseload perspective, we were more than capable of doing that, but if you've ever gone to an early childhood classroom, that looks much, much different than it does a 4th grade classroom. To go back and forth between those needs, that made it difficult. And I would say we were doing the best that we could, but I think by adding a staff member, so we are now early childhood through 2nd grade, 3rd through 5th, and then 6th through 8th, we are able to provide a much better service for our kiddos in that regular education setting, which is where we want to meet those needs. We can then help our teachers also, work as independent as possible without having, paraprofessionals and special education teachers in that room, because they have the time to meet with them, during their PLCs, during their prep times, and actually go over what kind of supports, best meet the needs of those current kiddos. Any questions on any of the student services that we are currently providing?
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Betsy?
All right, we will move to the consent agenda items, which includes the meeting notice certification, regular meeting minutes from November 14th, financial status, resignations and retirements, and hirings.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving to discussion action, we will begin with the Spanish trip.
All right, we're back, hopefully. Right, Julie? We canceled a trip to Peru in 2020. I believe we were supposed to take that, so we're hoping to travel again here in 2024. Traditionally, I've done it during spring break, but we're going with a summer trip this time after state baseball, in case we make it to state, just to ease the tension between Mr. Rayburn and myself, between me trying to take his athletes for a week in the middle of the season. So hopefully everybody's happier that way. We're going to Guatemala and Belize. We'll be doing 4 nights in a homestay in Antigua, Guatemala, 2 nights in a hotel in Belize, and then 2 nights at a beach in Belize. And then each slide kind of breaks it down further. So day 1, we stay with families in homestays. There are 2 to 3 students in each home, depending on the numbers of students. The adults are in a different home, so only students with these families.
In Guatemala, the families really didn't speak English, generally speaking. It really depends country to country. But most of them have hosted over 100 kids. They do this as a job. They do this regularly, so they're really good at communicating with students. And even if they do speak English, they will pretend not to so that the students have to understand. So that's a perk. We eat most of our meals at our homestays and we sleep there, but usually during the day we're out and we'll get lunch elsewhere as a group, depending on where we are. I'm hoping our homestays are in the same location in Guatemala. We did the first half of this trip to Guatemala piece in 2017, and our homestays were all a couple blocks away from the downtown area, and we were all neighbors. Like sometimes you could see each other from the balcony of your house, or the, I guess, balcony. So we were able to get together after dinner and go around the city and check out markets or find a concert or do whatever we want as a group in the afternoon. So day one is basically flying in. These are some pictures from the homestay last time. We can just kind of cruise through this. Or I can actually. Day two, we tour the historic center of Antigua and we visit the craft market. Antigua is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so it's very colonial. Everything has to be built according to the colonial architecture. Everything looks like it's been there since the Spaniards arrived. Day two, we also do salsa lessons. And then day three, we go to a coffee plantation where we learn about how coffee is planted, it's grown. This is a pretty sustainable agriculture development. This farm has a lot of different layers of trees, which makes the coffee bird friendly, so I like that. We have the option to zip line. Most kids opt in. I usually let the group choose, but majority choose, so I've already included the actual price for the zip line in the cost. However, as a group, if they decided they didn't want to zip line, which never happens, we would just subtract that. It's about $100. Day three then, after zip lining and the coffee, we spend an afternoon volunteering with students. This program was an after-school program for single mothers, and so we spent time playing with the kids. I always tell students this tends to be actually one of the favorite parts of every trip. This company includes a volunteer, at least one volunteer afternoon in each of their itineraries, but allows them to feel connected with the culture, so it's a really great opportunity. Day four, we hike up Pacaya Volcano. You can see the three volcanoes that are near Antigua. Got to roast marshmallows in the heat that's remaining under the rocks. I brought up some Wendy's farm sausages too, so we got to roast some vanilla Wisconsin sausage. It's a pretty cool activity. We then take a flight from Antigua, which if this is Guatemala, Antigua's over here. We fly up here to Tikal, which is a Mayan ruin site, one of the largest. It's really incredible. You see some stuff there. Monkeys, turkeys, lots of creatures. So then from Tikal, this part is new to me. We haven't done this yet, so these are just stock pictures, but we take a bus from Tikal across the border into Belize, and we have another volunteer morning in Belize. And then in the afternoon, we get to canoe through a cave system. And the itinerary says we get to see Mayan ruins and artifacts and skeletal remains. So I'm super excited about that. And then the last 2 days of this trip are beach days. On these days, our meals aren't included, so they recommend about $30 a day, but that gives us the freedom to plan according to student wants on that portion of the trip. The rest of the trip, they don't have a lot of say in the itinerary, but here we'll be looking at maybe snorkeling or fishing if we end up getting a bunch of guys who are interested in that, or gals. So the total cost for this trip is $3,315. That includes the zip line. And it also includes an extra 100 if we have less than 12 or less students that sign up, which is about what I expect. 12 or less sounds standard. In the past, I've taken about 6 or 7, but I think the last trip was a few more. So it's been growing, and I'm hoping we can fill this one. It's a little cheaper than Peru. So most meals are included except the 2 on the beach days. The other money they need is for spending money for souvenirs. About $15 is what they recommend per volunteer experience, because what they'll do is give us a list. The after school program gives us a list, which allows us to go do some shopping and practice
shopping for their needs, and then we donate that to them. And then, of course, passports and a baggage fee. So we'll be doing a lot of fundraising. As I'm sure you guys are aware, fundraising looks a little bit different now than it did when I started these trips. So you can see there was a most raised and a least raised that I used to present to kids because it really depends on the effort you put in. State statute, right, says that it has to be evenly applied, so this will look a little bit differently. But I'm hoping we have really motivated kids so that we can maintain some good fundraising activities and a lot of kids interested in fundraising because that will help all of the students pay for the trip. So, I think that's all.
How much do you anticipate getting out of the fundraising?
I'd have to pull up my spreadsheets, but for the Peru trip, we stopped raising pretty early. And I have about 3,000, a little like 3,400 sitting in the account yet from Peru. And that was probably about a year's worth of fundraising before we canceled that trip. So ideally, it would be great to raise 800 to 1,000 per student if we could. That's why I try to plan it 2 years out, just to make it feasible for families. We're looking at creative ways to use that 34 that's sitting in the account right now. I'd like to be able to offer some scholarships with that. I'd like to be able to develop a needs-based scholarship too. So those are things that are just kind of floating around in my head, and I've already talked to admin and Ms. Touch about it. So we're trying to see if there's a way that we can make that happen. Otherwise, those funds will be used to somehow offset the cost for students as well, because I don't need that money to sit in an account, right? But in an ideal world, yeah, 800 to 1,000 per student would be great if students are willing to work for it.
And then the rest of the money for the trip comes out of their pocket?
Correct. Other questions?
It's a good experience.
Yeah.
The thing I like about it is in some situations, this is unique. Like I haven't traveled out of the country myself personally through this opportunity through school. Alex offering this and other staff, it gives kids that opportunity to get some traveling and experiences. So thank you, Alex.
So do you need an approval from us for the trip?
Yes, we do.
Because of the planning, we need to, just with the timeline, we need to get the ball rolling.
I will approve just looking for what words I should use, the Spanish trip for the summer of 2024 to Guatemala and Belize.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, next is music trip to Dorian Festival.
Dr. Watson, would you like to?
Yeah, this is an annual trip that we do. This is one student going, but it's out of state. And so that needs a board approval. There's not much to it as far as, there's no cost to students. We have a chaperone already established, so kind of standard that simply, because we're going to state, we need board approval.
Do we pay for it,
Um,
the district?
yeah, there's not much in the way of cost to it. And so, yeah, we pay for the travel, right? They take the van, I think. That's
Yes,
what it is.
yes, and the cost comes out of the club.
Oh, okay, right, so it's a club cost.
So is this vocal or instrumental?
Vocal.
And what state?
Iowa.
Thanks. I'll make a motion to approve the music trip to the Dorian.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, next we need to address the updates to the school field trip procedures handbook.
So you see the changes are highlighted. Pam, you can jump in on anything too that you want to add to. They talked about, there were some updates related to the indoor trampoline parks and inflatable parks because of the liability risks associated with those. we updated language to mirror our practices. There were some minor language changes. Dr. Watson caught the criminally screened,
Yes.
other than we want to have them screened criminally.
Right.
The language related to staying in a room, as far as students staying in a room on the trip unless it's with an immediate family member.
Money being paid.
Yep, the money being repaid as far as that,
So- On that page 17 though, and I really apologize,
Yep.
because I asked a question about the first reading and said it wasn't critical to know today.
no, it is, we knew it was, and we were prepared to address it.
Okay.
I know what you
Okay,
meant.
but I missed that it was actually in this because they're attached, and it's only because I've had people reach out to me to tell me it's not in state statute, so I feel
It's
like I
not.
actually,
It's an IRS,
It's IRS.
it's IRS, it's federal guidelines.
so I
It's not
feel
state.
like, but I feel like we need to see, like this is gonna be a highly questioned thing from parents, so.
It's in the policy, we reference,
Perfect.
the Internal Revenue Code, the right number on 374. So that, we'll get to that.
Okay,
What
great.
reg-
So-
what regulation it is.
What do we do
Okay,
with
perfect.
374? Yeah, sorry
But
for
I
that.
can't approve this until I know that information, only because I've specifically had people reach out to me saying we're not following it right, so I just need to feel grounded that we are. And only, because I think this, I mean, if we need to do this because the IRS says it, that's one thing, and that's what I'm gonna say.
Yep.
But I actually think not letting some families fundraise more while others don't need to and aren't gonna contribute are going to hurt the kids who need more money. And so unless IRS says we absolutely have to, and I can like find that and feel good with it, I'm actually not okay with that change. Now, if the IRS says it, the IRS doesn't care if I don't agree with them, right? So I completely agree, and there's no chance. But if they don't, I think we're hurting our students who families can't afford $2,000 because my kid had to take 1,000 of that when I maybe didn't need it for my kid. You know, I feel like we're going to not allow some students to be able to go because some parents don't need it. So they have no intention to put forth the effort to fundraise because they don't need it, and it's fine. And then the kids who really need it are gonna suffer. So again, if the IRS, this is tight and there's nothing we can do about it, then that's the way it is. But if we get a choice on this, this is not my choice.
To clarify, to your point in the email that you asked, a family does not have to, we have
Well,
a
no,
possibility
let's,
to defer from taking. So
can I,
just to
can
clarify.
I address any of these questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The best way to look at it, and Gary Forbes was working with this as well, but if you have Susie Smith, who is from an affluent family, has tons of grandmas, grandpas, aunts, uncles, everybody buys from her, and she ends up getting a profit of $1,500. Okay, then you have Johnny Jones over here, who's a foster child, just placed with a family in Pittsville, has zero resources and can't fundraise because he may absolutely want to sell and cannot. So we're punishing that child because he doesn't have the resources to fundraise. That's what the IRS is saying. By privatizing the benefits of fundraising, we could lose our exempt status as a school district. So it's actually in the regulations,
374.
it is IRS
374.
IRS Code Regulation 1.501 C3-1C. And then you can look underneath there, there's 1 and 2, and 2 deals exactly with privatizing of benefits to students and families.
Well, but I'm gonna have to actually look up the code, right?
Yeah. So I want to jump in on a couple points though too, it's exactly, Julie, what, I think we're saying the same thing in different ways. That's exactly what this is set up to do, is to avoid having students that want to be able to go and don't have the resources to do the fundraising to be able to go. And those families who do have the resources and say, I don't need a share of that fundraising money, we have an opt-out that they will be able to, they don't
Right.
have to take their share. They can leave that in the pool. They
Well, this is
absolutely
what
can
is
say, I
going
don't.
to be suggested, we need to verify with an attorney
Yeah.
first, but, so, both Susie and Johnny are going to try and fundraise, and Susie may not need any of that money, but out of the goodness of her heart, her and her family decide to fundraise and help share the profit with all the students that
But
need
do
the
not
money.
want to take a share of it.
So what I suggested to Jason is we could contact the attorney and send out a slip to every single parent for the XYZ trip. The fundraising dollars are $1,500, and everyone gets $100 toward their music ticket or whatever the deal is, you know? Do you want this money, yes, or do you not want this money?
No.
Do you opt out of accepting the fundraising dollars? If you opt out, then it'll get divided among everybody else that's left. So that leaves encouraging everyone to still participate in fundraising, but not penalizing those that don't have the resources to get 50 orders from grandmas, grandpas, and uncles. That's the purpose behind this, not privatizing benefits.
You know, they make this all so complicated. When these parents receive these forms, they're gonna be like, what? What am I supposed to do? I mean, is there's a way that we can resolve this, you know, before the, I mean, it's actually presented to the parents so that they're not so confused about their options, I guess, simplify things.
We have actually had group fundraising in our policies for a while now that encourage everyone to participate, but not penalize anyone. It's only kind of been brought to our attention that we are privatizing for most everything that's fundraised in the school. It's only recently sort of been discovered. So we've always tried to encourage group fundraising, that the entire music department does fundraising and they share in the profits. It's only recently brought to our attention that not all fundraising is an equal share of the profit.
And Julie, to clarify, I'm sorry, Mary, I want to say this before I lost the train of thought. Where there may be some confusion for folks is if the fundraising is privatized, like if someone uses an outside organization to do fundraising, they can divvy up the fundraising however they like.
If it's totally outside the school district, they can do whatever they
If they're doing it
want.
through the school is where this applies. So that
Yeah.
if a group wanted to get a privatized fundraising going through some company or something, they would be able to earmark funds to individual students. It's those that are done through the school district using school organizations to do the fundraising.
Am I allowed to ask a clarifying question? But that money is still transferred into the school account potentially, so then does that not need to follow the same regulation, or then I need a separate, or you would need a separate outside of school account to hold that money? To clarify that?
In regards to running your entire thing
If it was
outside the school
privatized.
district?
If you were to do a privatized fundraiser, could you transfer that money to the
Everything
school
from the
account?
point that you left and you went outside the school could no longer be, the trip could no longer be school sponsored or school supervised if it went outside the school district. So you could say, we're raising money for the Pittsville students to go to wherever. Well, you couldn't say the Pittsville School District is raising money. So you could still do that. But if it's no longer school sponsored or school supervised, you lose the, all of our staff that are advisors that go on the trips, they lose their workers' comp. All the students lose their student accident insurance, because it's now not following school policies, it's outside the school district.
So,
I don't think that was my question.
so again, I'm totally cool if everybody else is good with this. I have to do some research on this before I can vote on it, because I'm gonna get a lot of phone calls when this comes through. So I just have to be confident that we, like, and I've already been shared, this district does it, this district, like, so that's my issue, is I just have to be confident and be knowledgeable, and I mean, I'm reading this, but like,
What's
like
your
it's
concern?
talking about
Somebody doesn't
shareholders.
wanna take the money? Like if 10 people raise $1,000, someone doesn't wanna take their 100? Is that what, like, what's your concern with?
My concern is that
or other-
we're eliminating, we're not allowing kids. So again, I have no problem with this money doesn't belong to you. And I love that we've clarified that, like, if you just decide not to go on a trip, it's going back into the fund at the school. And like, I mean, I love that we're clarifying that. That's fine. I think that's great. And it's just because I've seen so many kids be a part of this and seen such a diversity of, And it's not actually about selling butter braids, it's more about volunteering your time to like run concession stands or volunteering at the Lions Park to do things. I mean, I have seen kids give up every single weekend all summer long because it is the only way they can go. And now they might get 800 of their $3,000, yet they won't be able to go. Like they needed to raise all 3,000 and we stopped them from doing that because if 10 kids are going, we actually have to raise 30,000 for them to get their $3,000. And I understand the idea of, you know, Johnny might not have the friends to buy the butter braids, but the fundraisers I've seen done is actually your time, of which I would tend to say if a kid really wanted to, we should be able to figure out how to help them do that. And that's my concern, is it's actually going to not allow students who have to raise all $3,000 to get this experience, because there's no way 10 kids are gonna raise 30 grand together, especially when you've got 5 parents who don't need it, right? So like they have no motivation to help except just being kind to others, and they're all busy and they're working full-time and doing all the things that don't allow them to actually do that. So I feel so strongly about it because it's actually the kids who need the whole trip paid that are gonna lose. And again, if for sure the IRS says it, it's just, why are multiple other districts not doing, like, are they all breaking IRS or are we
Yes.
reading it?
Well, I don't want to
Yes.
speak to other districts, but
They are.
like that isn't something, and I totally understand, good questions asked, but like, there are lots of things that people may not be following policies. That's why I get a little reluctant and say, well, let's look at what other schools are doing, because like, we need to do what we have to do and what's right to do.
Right.
I do have a question though. What if, say there's 10 students, one student does nothing, they choose not to do any fundraising whatsoever. There is no exclusionary, like if they don't participate, they still get the funds?
Unless they would sign off and say, you know, if this document is allowable for our attorney, they could sign off that they're not going to ask for fundraising money, anything they fundraise goes, or they're just not gonna fundraise, they don't want any of it. That would be something they would have to specifically exclude themselves from.
But then what is the goal of those 5 kids that don't need anything? What's their goal to fundraise?
Well, I would hope that there is enough support generated that this is a group fundraising so that all of them can go. That is the purpose of
That's the hopes, but that's not reality.
Well, right.
Okay. You know, to me, this is an attitudinal, an opportunity for a sea change, maybe in thinking, and those types of things take time, realistically. And again, I'm the oldest one here, and I don't, Matt's smiling at me again. But I remember back in my days, it was always group fundraising. You didn't get your own pot of money. And again, maybe I'm old, well, I am old. But I don't know when this changed.
I think it changed when trips cost $3,000. So like, because even when I was in high school, it's the same thing. And I think it is different, because I think we wouldn't want to do this if we were raising money for the music program, or we're raising money for it is, everyone sells butter braids and this is what it is. I completely agree. I think it's trips that cost $3,000 and $4,000 that exclude kids to go that can't afford almost raising the entire $3,000.
Well, but as Pam indicated, I think you gave a very stark example of a child that doesn't have family here who can't fundraise. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the thoughts I have is there, and again, this may be a legal thing, is there a, like a contract that can be developed where, okay, if I want to go on this, I have to do so many hours of volunteer work, like you mentioned, working at Lions Park, I guess, that I will participate in at least 3 of the 5 fundraisers, or, something like that.
Something where there's no monetary value put
Yeah,
or received for it. So that's the biggest thing, is if you're receiving the monetary value, if you're donating your time, and it's gonna, I would have to check with Barry to see where it lies, but you know, like to Alex's question, if we go completely outside the school district, so if this trip is gonna run completely outside the school district, not school sponsored, not school supervised, they manage all their own money. They can do whatever they want, as long as
Right.
they don't say the Pittsville School District is raising money for. They can
Right.
say Pittsville students are.
But can they do all of the school fundraising and then say they wanted to do this one additional fundraiser that was outside?
Is that what you were
That's my
asking,
question.
Alex?
Yeah, so can they do like all the school fundraising?
It would be like,
They wanted to do one outside.
Right, it would be like a separate booster club, like the PTO.
Yes.
It's outside the school district. They maintain their own checkbook, their own tax return if they need to. Most
But
of
that
them
wouldn't change the
don't.
whole trip to not school sponsored if they chose
It
to
would
do
change
one
the
outside.
entire trip.
If
Yeah.
we did one outside fundraiser, it would change the
Okay,
entire
well,
trip.
Yes.
And
Okay,
where's
yeah.
that? Like, what can we tie back to that would say that?
Say what?
Like, what language would say that the whole trip becomes
Because you cannot privatize any fundraiser. So if you're going to privatize it and still say you want to keep the trip inside the school, you've just privatized fundraising.
okay, so,
And we can't
And
And
you
that's
cannot do
directly
that.
from Barry, Pam,
Right,
that's directly
Barry
from Barry,
Forbes
that's
said that,
verified
yes.
through legal.
Yeah.
So if we have to raise a large sum of money, what benefit is it to go through the school then if we want the kids to be able to do it? To me, it seems like going through the
The
school. is a hindrance
benefits,
to raise
right,
money.
so you need to weigh the benefits. It's not school sponsored or school supervised, so the advisors, if their staff, are going to lose their workers' comp if they get injured while they're gone.
Mhm.
Students are going to lose their accident insurance if they get injured while they're gone,
I mean, through the school. Right.
through the school.
I just
Right.
assume kids.
Right, they still would, but that would be lost, you're not covered under the workers, or excuse me, under the district's liability anymore either. So any negligence or anything is taken on by either the tour company or the
The individual
advisors.
chaperone.
Well, they would sign an understanding, parents have to sign off on all that and understand that that's the risk they're taking.
Yes,
They would have to,
yeah,
but that
Right.
is a viable option, is that any organization could do this fully outside the school district.
Well, and we have.
Right,
I mean, the trip to Italy and Greece in 2020.
it was before my time, I don't think I think they've all been inside the school district since
Well-
2015.
okay. In addition to fundraisers, I'm assuming that some of these students have jobs.
Yes.
I mean, so they're kind of doing their own fundraising,
Right,
you know,
Right.
but they're doing it on their own.
and Alex has brought up about need-based scholarships too, as another component. You know, trying to think of all those things that you're talking about, Julie, is we want this to be an opportunity available to all students. Is that need-based scholarships where students who truly did need it could apply under certain parameters to get extra funding available to try and make the trip a reality.
Julie, just so I'm clear, so an example of a question that you might get is where there's somebody working a lot at, let's say, a concession stand. And, you know, the question comes in, why is just this one person putting in all their time and the others aren't even volunteering to do this? So a question may be that you get, that you be from a parent, you know, why is my son busting his butt while somebody else can't come in here and help out? Is that fair?
It is, but you know what? I'll take that question any day and say to a parent, I'm really glad you're working hard. The question that I don't want to take from a parent, unless I can really feel like, and again, I
What is
mean,
the question?
the question is, my kid can't go because there's no way that they have the capacity to raise $30,000. And there's 10 kids going, and no matter how hard my kid works, it has to get split evenly. The parent who comes to say, I worked all of this, but I can afford to go, I'll take that every single time.
So your belief,
It's the other
so
one.
your belief then is that when they ask that question, that I mean, you feel that they should or should, that student that doesn't have the capacity, they should still be able to go based on the division of the funds, or they should not be able to.
I'm sorry, I'll have to say that again.
So that student that you're saying didn't have the opportunities to
go.
raise the funds that everybody else might have worked hard for.
Johnny Jones, that's a new foster child
Yep.
district, I think is what Chris is saying. If
Yep.
for someone like that, he has no resources.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
a
but he
lot of
can't
the
raise- He can
fundraisers,
raise $3,000, but he can't raise.
I get what Julie, I think I'm on the same page
Right.
now, it's like you're
I
saying
I have
is.
zero chance of going because
Correct.
he's never gonna be able to make up a difference, because he has to raise enough money for everybody.
correct.
And I'm almost there on your thought process, but I wanna know what your belief is then, should Johnny be able to go?
Yes.
Okay.
They should both be able to go.
Okay.
But I don't want Johnny foster kid in this example to not be able to go because he has to raise so much more because my kid didn't need it.
See, the problem is there's so many different situations that can happen, but yet in writing, it has to be written one way or the other. So that's what we're,
And quite honestly, where I feel like I just don't have enough information tonight, I probably will have it by next week because I will do a ton of research on this.
can we table it?
But I want the
What's first
attorney, I want
It's
to
first
ask,
reading tonight.
the question that I would have is I want to ask our attorney. Because I also work with, I ask attorneys things all the time too at work, right? Like I have to do, we're a 501c3, like I want to ask my attorney, if I wanted to do this, how could I do it, right? Attorneys answer your questions in both ways. And if we are told we can't, then it stinks and it's really unfortunate. And I would also like us to think about how we could create scholarships so kids could go, and I'd be the first one to put money in and contribute to it so that kids could go on these trips. So if that's our only option, but I just want to be cautious and make sure that, because I also think attorneys answer the question we ask, and I want to make sure that they know that the board would prefer not to do this if we didn't have to. Plus, we have been doing it, and it's not like we've gotten in trouble. Now, I get that. I get that doesn't mean that, like, you can claim ignorance and not follow the law. I get that. But I also believe that when we had the huge thing that happened before, we were gonna get dinged on our audit, and I didn't see it on the audit when I looked. So I just want to make sure, because I think it's a big enough deal that we need it in writing from, like, we just need to, and but if everybody else is good with it, like, I'm
This
just one
is
voice.
just the first reading tonight.
But it's not that, it's the procedure handbook getting approved, that's where we're at. Yeah, I wasn't, that's my fault. I saw it as a first reading and I had these questions and I'm like, it's not really a big deal because we can move it forward to second reading. But the handbook, I don't know if it can wait a month to go or if it has to be done now.
If parents can opt out of accepting that money, can they opt into a system where the money is divided by the hours?
I would have to look to see if, because when they're talking fundraising, they're talking monetary fundraising, not time.
Not the hours.
And how do you equate, you could do minimum wage, whatever, but to Chris's question is, how can one child do it and another child can't?
Well, I think the division, when you're talking about sales and resources, is valid, but Julie's making a really valid point about the students who need the money will put in the time.
Yeah.
And so if we can legally have people opt into and agree to a system in which they are receiving funds based on the time they put in, and we can agree to evenly spread sales fundraisers between them, then that would be an optimal system to legally cover ourselves.
I agree on
I think that would be
Scholarships.
an amazing solution.
But how do you quantify and put a dollar value to pay in? So if you need $30,000 for 10 people to go, but you've only raised $25,000 in cash, and now you have $5,000 in volunteer dollars, where does that $5,000 come to pay into the company?
Can you say that again? Sorry.
If you need $30,000 for the trip, you've raised $25,000 in cash and $5,000 is volunteer dollars that someone has earned so they can go on the trip. Where does that $5,000 cash come to pay to the trip company?
Well, it comes from a volunteer opportunity, or time opportunity versus a fundraiser. So the question is, if we're selling pizzas as a group of Spanish students going, as a group, whatever we sell in pizzas is going to get split evenly. And we're hoping all of you at least sell 20. Like that's kind of the typical. But if someone wants to come every weekend at the Lions Park to work and the Lions Club is going to pay for you to work the concession stand, that money raised would only be given to the kids who actually come and put in all the time. So it would be, I mean, it's how things had been organized.
So you're putting the dollar value to it then,
Correct.
so you're private.
And splitting up equally amongst the people who put the time in doing that extra activity.
You
I
are,
think that's a
You've
reasonable
privatized
ask,
it, though.
Mr. Chair.
you are, but as you're saying that legally you could have people opt out of this system, could you also have people opt into a system that allows for
I'm not
privatization?
saying you legally can do that, I need to ask.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be information that would be helpful for us to make a decision on this.
We
I
could-
feel like today is
I
not
don't
the time
think
to
we
make
can
this.
opt out of not following IRS regulation,
Right,
but we
what
may
I'm
be
saying-
able to opt out of taking fundraising dollars.
I think it's not a matter of opting out, it's opting in. Like, I don't think it should be thought of as opting out, it should be opting in. We opt into where part of it is split equally and part of it is based on time. And it's not dollar amounts so much, so say the Lions, however much they raise, you get 30% of it or whatever. You're not saying you're getting, $30 per every hour that you put in, it's a percentage of this, so it would be, say there's 10 hours and you worked 50% of them, you would get 50% of that pot. Something like that. It's not necessarily a dollar amount, it's a percentage based on the time proportion that you put in. I do think that if it's possible, it is worth rewarding the effort people put into something. And if someone can put in more effort to get to a certain point, I think it's worth us seeing if there is a way to work around that. Because like Julie said, there are kids that are willing to work really hard because that's the only way they can go. And if we can help someone do that, great. If we can't, then I think that it would be worth exploring the option that a scholarship system would be based on those hours that are put in. So then it may be looking at how that scholarship fund is made, or maybe that we create something like that as a way around it so that we have equal opportunities for all of our students, because that's what we're all about, equal opportunities for everybody. We want to make sure that there are equal opportunities, and however we have to work around that, we'll work around the IRS, we just have to figure out how.
And that would be an additional educational opportunity for these students to see that the ones that are actually putting in a little more effort are being rewarded for that. Instead of now, each and every kid, even though you may not have the opportunities to do something, you are still an individual that can get up, go and do a little work, put in a little time, and when that student starts understanding that, hey, this is a beneficial thing to me, and it gets them out, it gets them to interact with the community too. It's a positive thing all around when that individual that may not have certain resources can at least put in their time and be rewarded for it.
And to Mary Ann's point, yes, those kids can have jobs, but a kid who may not have those resources, may not have a car to get to Marshfield to Rapids where you can make more money. And they might be working at a job here where they're making barely minimum wage, if they're serving, versus having some other kid who has a little more resources making $15 an hour. So I do think that there is some value in having time as some sort of component to this, if there's a way to manage it. And obviously we want to follow the laws, that is our job. We want to follow what we need to follow, but we also need to make sure we're creating the most opportunities for the most kids. So I think that this is something that we need to really dive into, and I feel like we're not ready to make the decision on this today. I feel like this is something that we can, obviously we are going to be starting some fundraising, but I don't think we're going to be starting fundraising before January. Maybe looking at it, but I don't think there's going to be any significant amount of fundraising. So I think tabling this for a month is not unreasonable, so that we can all be comfortable with the decisions and the information that we have.
I agree that tabling it would be good, but I would really be interested in what Maddie and Sam, what your thoughts are, listening to all of this.
I've been thinking a lot, because as we're looking at our senior class trip, just doing the totals on if we were to do the out-of-state trip, we're looking at like $200 per kid. And I've had at least a handful of students come to me that I wouldn't normally have conversation with on a daily basis, that our paths just don't cross. And they've come to me and said that they need to know before Christmas if their family needs to start saving $200. And as a student, that breaks my heart to think that students are worrying about $200, let alone $3,000 to go on a trip, just to have one final memory with their senior class. And that's the valid point where we're thinking is if we ask the entire senior class to work concessions, we can't mandate every single kid to go work a night because of work, sports, and other commitments. But then, is it fair? We're asking the same question. Is it fair for the kid that worked 3 concession nights and the kid that worked none to get the same sum of money? So I guess we're definitely comprehending what the discussion is, and it's definitely something that we think needs to be a concern.
I kind of like the idea of like the percentage, kind of like you mentioned, that you go based off of like the percentage of how much time someone put in, and then compare it to like someone else that should be rewarded more for the time that they put in.
Or earned, because I think, like, I understand what because I didn't even think of this, so I'm glad Julie brought it up when I read it before the meeting, but it's like, it's trying to level the playing field. But in our case, it's not, because we live in a place where a third of our students, is that what you said, are?
A little over a third.
Yeah,
Yeah, almost
so,
40%.
yeah, so if I was the only, person with less means at a larger, more wealthier school district, this would be fine. But it doesn't work for us here. It kind of has the exact opposite of that.
These are all, honestly, it's a great conversation, because the idea here is that we need to make sure we're following guidelines, but we do want access for all of our students. And I'm just summarizing the thing is there's 3 components to me that I'm seeing here. Is the first component is the IRS got the guidelines on the privatizing of fundraising, like through sales. Second thing would be needs-based scholarships as far as ways to allow people. The third piece would be if you're doing like concessions or a group-based thing, can we tie the hours the student puts in particularly to that pot of money where it's divided up based upon the time and the effort that you put into it. So I think we have clarification on the first part. The one we have clarification on the privatized fundraising.
Yeah, and I think bottom line, Jason, the question I have is one, defining privatize. Like what does that really mean when you're
It
privatizing?
means to assign a dollar value to a specific student or family.
That's the actual language.
But it doesn't actually say that in there. Like
I somewhere in this file of stuff, I have it from the.
Okay, so that's helpful, it's like to see like actually what it's defined, because I can't actually find what it's defined as. Number 2, asking the attorney, what avenues do we have available to us? Because here are some of our concerns. So we might not be able to sell pizzas and divide it by kids, but could we, I even think of like, Lions Club or some other things. Gosh, they could actually give scholarships to the kids based on what that is, but could it come into the school or did that just get private? So those are the questions that I feel like would be so helpful, is this is important and passionate for us. So tell us if there is any wiggle room and there's anything we can do versus we understand there's gonna be a lot of limitations, but what are the things that are limitations that we maybe could do so that we could offer that to our students?
So can I ask a clarifying question? So are you looking to be able to just privatize foreign travel and not everything else? Someone said, Julie, well, we shouldn't do this for choir or something you said. So what question can I ask, or should I ask as far as, is it okay to do it over a certain dollar value? Is it, what are you, or are you just saying altogether? So music could do it when they do the jazz festival. That's kind of where we discovered they were doing it.
I would say the dollar amount
Ask
matter.
me-
And the dollar, I would say the dollar amount doesn't matter. Is there a difference between $100,000 and 2? And how many kids do you have in your class? 50,
Well,
40, 70, 800.
that's why I was wondering, because that comment was said, are you looking to be able to privatize any fundraising?
I guess my question to them would be, is there anything we can? Because I would want to do as many as we could. I would want to create the opportunity that if students needed to do it, that we could anytime we legally can.
For example, even junior class dues, we used to, Marlis Downs would allow students to work in the concession stand by the middle school to pay their class dues. So even that $55 can be a burden to some families, so
We cannot,
used to.
yeah, no, I'm gonna say, we can't accept, or we can't force students that fall in that 40% of free and reduced to pay for things like an AP test, class dues, we can't do that.
Okay.
That's why I believe Marlis did that, she used the profits from that to help cover it, but in reality, the district. As far as the needs-based scholarship, I reached out to Marshfield Area Community Foundation, Stacy Schultz, she's the director. And I discussed about putting that inside our foundation, because that's how our other clubs have to do that. First, she initially said yes, because they do it for a flight school and a dance school, but the difference is that's a school and it's tuition. She said travel. She cautioned, she said we could do it, we could write our own application, but we need to be cautious on the needs base, because as a scholarship foundation, they can pull in information from a FAFSA. They can get the IRS documentation on, what everybody earns. We obviously cannot do that. She suggested free and reduced applications, just speak to Matt Andres and get, this student, where do they fall? But, basic. She also said, because our policy is not to pay the students or the families directly, that if we were allowed to pay the trip company, we could probably do it that way. So she didn't totally disregard it, but it would not be a scholarship because it's not a tuition-based type thing. It would be an award, and it would get anything $600 or more, we would have to do a 1099 for. And that is one of the caveats with the fundraising. If you read through all the statutes on that component in that IRS code regulation, as you're not, once it's privatized, those become taxable benefits. So we don't want to fall into that trap either. And the purpose of not privatizing is to keep the exemption status. So example, if somebody's home burns down and you donate $50 to that family over at the bank because they have a whatever, or a GoFundMe page for that specific event, you can't claim that on your taxes. That's IRS code. You can't privatize that fundraising. However, if you gave money to your church, it's not for any one person or family, it's not privatized. So that's sort of like if you read through all that code about exemption status and privatizing, that's kind of it in a very small nutshell. I mean, if I'm tabling this, we can go through the rest of these changes, and some of it's just language things. And I've made note of all those questions, and I'll reach out to Barry. We may have to go to the other attorney as well, because some of these questions are getting kind of specific, and I don't know if Barry would commit to how do we get around IRS code, or what's our loophole to find a way. Another attorney might be able to do that.
Well, and another resource is our auditor.
No, they're not legal. They're only legal.
Yeah.
They can't do legal advice.
Okay, so I don't know who Barry is, but.
Barry
I think
Forbes
he's
from
WASB.
WASB.
Here's
Barry Forbes.
WASB,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
okay, good, yes.
He's not
That
free,
was-
well, he's not free. We pay for legal services through WASB, so that's where you go.
Right, so yeah,
He's
that's,
not $400 an hour.
okay, good, that's what I was hoping. because
Right,
my
he's
thought
not
was,
$400 an hour.
WASB, how's everybody else doing?
Right. Yeah, I'll make a note, about other schools.
Okay, we'll table the field trip procedures then. A good clarification from Barry. It's a good conversation. Remember, same goal for everyone here is we want to open up access for kids, so good questions, good answers.
Okay, so we move to first reading of updates to policy 352.1.
Okay, this is 352.1, the prioritization of the, under F there is, if we have school district staff members that are willing to chaperone, the priority goes to, we'd rather have staff members chaperoning. If that's not the case, then we certainly can look for outside chaperones. The evidence of insurance coverage is something that Pam had indicated the board had requested in the past that we make sure that we we're going with reliable, companies and, that are insured. And then the language, the foreign study tours, instead of out-of-country field trips, was just a language change.
So you're just clarifying and making it specific. It
Correct.
doesn't really change anything.
No, no.
All right, any questions on this one, or are we okay with moving it forward?
Yes.
Okay, now let's move on to the next one, which is 374.
Julie, can I have my 374 back?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the one we want to table, correct?
I'm okay moving it forward.
Yeah, this one,
But it's being moved forward with all the questions that we just talked about. I mean, to get answers before we would actually approve it.
yeah, because just to clarify, because the field trip procedures was gonna be for approval, that's what we're tabling. This is just first reading of the policy, so we can move this forward and we can get more clarification for the second reading on that. Particularly, we should talk about 8, Julie, right, where the exempt organizations cannot privatize.
Yeah.
So we can move it forward to a second reading and we'll get clarification on that piece.
All right, is there any issue with moving that one forward? Okay. Then we'll move to policy 343.4 exhibit.
Just want to make sure that is updating our, through, what we up through, must be recommendations.
Updates.
Yep.
All right, any problem moving that one forward? Okay, we'll move to 423. Just open enrollment.
Same recommendations from,
So there's a lot of yellow in this,
Yep.
and I did read it. Is there any substantial change, like, is there any practice change, or is it just clarifying?
these
things?
are language updates from recommendations from WASB, so no,
But it's
it
not-
structurally doesn't change anything.
I didn't read it as like that our practice was changing.
Nope.
But I just had to ask, because there's so much yellow, I
Yep.
wanted to make sure I didn't miss
It's a
something
lot of
when I
yellow.
read it. Okay, perfect, thank you.
All right, any discussion, any opposition to moving that one forward? Okay, 423 rule.
Same thing,
Procedure.
language recommendations, doesn't change our procedures that we're following in the statutory procedures. The policy with,
Oh, yes, the definitions.
All right, any discussion? Any opposition to moving that one forward? All right, first reading of this policy, 431. Student attendance.
this has even more yellow.
Well, it's the whole thing.
Yeah, it's the entire thing.
Everything that did exist, you got rid of, and you put a
Correct.
completely new,
I
correct?
With more
totally
expanded
agree.
definitions and explanations, but once again, changes nothing structurally to what we
And
do.
changes no practice.
No practices.
That's what's in it.
Yep.
That's what's important.
All right, any discussion on this one? Any opposition to moving this forward? Okay, 431 rule.
There was one change, you see, there's a little green we want to sprinkle it in because we have so much yellow on there on this, page 3. We removed that, the program for children at risk, because we do not have a formal program for children at risk as far as identify like an alternative school.
All right, any discussion on this one?
No.
Any opposition to moving it forward? Okay, then we will move to the legislative report.
No report, because everybody's chilling right
I
now.
was waiting.
Just waiting.
I did share the communication with all staff today as far as they are looking for feedback related to the biennial budget. They have a form out where you can submit feedback. Any community members, I'm going to include it in my Friday communication to families too as well, but I sent it out to staff. It's a pretty simplified system where they can just click on it and submit a message about this is something I value. Please take this into consideration. So that'll be something I'll send out to families. And it'll be in the Pittsville Record next Tuesday for community members, for those that don't have students. It just is a way to give some feedback towards the upcoming budget, the annual budget.
Yeah, I read a report today that the governor is going to be doing statewide listening sessions.
Correct.
But I
One
don't
virtually.
think he'll be coming to Pittsville.
No, but there is a virtual option this time. They have one virtual, because it's prohibitive for folks who work. So they do have a virtual option, which is kind of nice. And then that message system to submit feedback that way. So, but other than that, it's been kind of crickets here lately as far as anything to update.
Okay. Any public comments, Deb? No. Okay. Then I will entertain a motion to move into closed session per state Wisconsin State Statute 19.851C.
I so move.
Roll call vote, please, Julie.
Nate?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Marianne?
Yes.
Julie? Yes.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Hearing closed.
I'll give you.
I told that. So definitely, all we have to do is.
Yeah.
Have a good night. All she asked.
So I'd like to.
Deb, just to clarify, you had said all you need us to do is have someone make a motion to.
I have your sheet
yeah,
here.
there you go. Got it.
Thank you.
I can do that, but I didn't have.
I got it.
I know that, I didn't tell you that. You gotta wait till she takes the